Hello, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller that is probably cursed to see all of the content in today's video immediately invalidated when it gets edited in the next Lost Omens setting book. But that's okay, we'll talk about it anyways. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome back to my Holidays in Golarion series. This is a series that takes a look at, well, the holidays in Golarion, what they mean inside of Pathfinder's core campaign setting, and how they might influence both players and game masters at the gaming table. On the Absalom Reckoning calendar, we are currently in the month of Pharast, which is roughly analogous to March here on planet Earth. And allow me to say for today's video that there's really not a lot going on. Like, if you dig into the Lost Omens travel guide and look at their holiday section, the reality is they don't give us much. In fact, there's really only two holidays associated with the month of Pharast. One of them is the Golemwalk parade, and the other is known as the Night of Tears. And I'll go ahead and tell you before we dive into these holidays that, honestly, these are both very local holidays. What do I mean? Well, both of these holidays are celebrated in very, very specific locations. The Golemwalk parade is celebrated in the city of Magnimaar in Varisia on the first Sunday in the month of Pharast, and then the Night of Tears is a vigil that's held on the 7th of Pharast in the city of Solku. That's harder to say than you'd think. In the city of Solku in the nation of Osirion. So, for both of these holidays, you're really only going to encounter them if you are in very specific places at, well, very specific points in time. We don't have any grand holidays that are celebrated across a wide variety of nations or a lot of different locations. These are very, very location-locked celebrations, and I will talk about that more here in a minute, but first let's talk about what both of these events actually celebrate. First up, we have the Golemwalk Parade. As I mentioned, this is celebrated in the city of Magnimaar, where there is a famous, I guess you would call it, magical factory called the Golemworks, and many people aspire to work there or to get support from the Golemworks, and so it has become a tradition in the city of Magnimaar on the first Sunday of Pharast that aspiring golem builders will basically participate in this large special parade where they are showing off their works. Everybody builds their own golem and marches them through town, and then when they get to the final stop, the Avenue of Heroes, all of the different golems are judged, and the people who do the best in this parade, they might either get a monetary sponsorship from the Golemworks, or they might even become employees of the Golemworks and earn some serious renown in the city at the same time. Now, this is going to go ahead and broach on what is one of the things that makes me a bit hesitant about this month's video, which is, with the Pathfinder 2e remaster, both of the holidays, as they currently exist in Golarion, are probably going to be edited in the future. When Paizo went through the whole remaster project, there were a lot of different things that changed, including certain terminology inside of the game. One of the big changes is, in the remaster, Golem is no longer a creature type. They've gotten rid of golems as a concept, as a mechanical trait that links certain creatures together, and as a result, well, golems aren't a thing anymore. Now, if I'm being honest, I don't know if it is a remaster name thing, like it's a term that they want to avoid using for possible legal entanglements. There's also some cultural connotations to the word golem. There are a few different reasons why Paizo might have stepped away from using that term golem, but with the remaster, we know that golems are no longer a thing in Pathfinder 2e, meaning that I strongly suspect in the future we're going to see this event probably changed in some fashion. Instead of the Golemwalk parade, instead of the Golemwalk parade, I could see them doing the Clockwork celebration. There's different ways that you can change up this particular event and keep it similar in concept, but I do think at some point Paizo is probably going to edit this event in their official writings. That's just something I see coming. The next holiday is another one that I think will see some editing, and that is the Night of Tears. Now, this particular event is associated with the city of Solku in Osirion, and it commemorates a famous battle known as the Battle of Red Hail. This battle occurred, if I remember correctly, about 24 years before the present date in the Golarion campaign setting. So, this would be something like, when I was a kid, I grew up when the Gulf War was happening. But, so that's a war that happened. It's something I remember in my lifetime, but I'm a couple of decades removed from the event. It's kind of one of those situations. It is a vigil in honor of this very famous battle that ended a war with a group of gnolls, or as they're referred to in the remaster, Colo, that were attacking the settlement. In that particular battle, there was a group of paladins of Iomedae who came to the aid of the town, and thanks to those paladins, they were actually able to win the battle very decisively, but still at great cost to the city. And so the city stands to this day, but every year on the anniversary of the battle, they kind of remember that battle because of the great sacrifices that were made to save the town. So, as I mentioned, both of these holidays are very, very local. If your players are going to participate in the Golemwalk parade, they've got to be in Magnimaar on the exact right date. If your players are going to experience the Night of Tears and the somber vigil that's associated with it, they've got to be in the town of Solku on the 7th of Pharast. These are events that don't really go beyond the city limits. But I will say that both of these holidays taken together bring up a few things that I think are worth discussing from a storyteller and possibly even a player's perspective, and one of them is the idea of local holidays. Oftentimes when we think about holidays, we think about events that extend beyond the borders of our towns, extend beyond the borders of our state, sometimes even extend beyond the borders of our nation. I've wished a Merry Christmas to people who live across the ocean from me. Oftentimes, when we think about holidays, we think about these very big events that are celebrated across huge regions, but there are also a lot of local holidays. Events that may be completely unknown outside of a certain setting, but in that local context are very, very meaningful. And the Night of Tears, the memorial for the Battle of Red Hail, I think that's a fantastic example of this. It's a really, really good way to establish some local flavor when you move into an area that might be a little more generic at your gaming table. Storytellers, if you are taking your players to a particular town or location and you're not exactly sure how to make that town or location stand out, you're not sure how to make it unique, a local festival or a local holiday is actually a really good way to do that. It's going to be a important thing for the town, so it's something that you can imagine the local population is going to be very involved in planning for, preparing for. You're going to see a lot of things in the build-up to that event, and there's certainly going to be a lot of pageantry for the event. Local festivals and holidays can carry a lot of weight and add a lot of flavor to a setting that is logically not going to carry weight anywhere else. Why has no one outside of Solku heard of the Night of Tears? Well, because that particular vigil, that particular holiday, commemorates an event that's important to that particular town. And I think storytellers, this is a very easy trick that you can use to help add some real flavor to an otherwise very generic location. The next thing I want to talk about when it comes to local holidays, or in particular, the Golemwalk parade, this is kind of what it inspired for me. Holidays actually represent a really good time for skill challenges at the gaming table. You know, imagine some player characters who need to make some political connections inside the city of Magnimaar, and they need to do it very, very quickly. How are they going to gain the fame and renown and the attention of some movers and shakers inside the town? Well, having a winning entry at the Golemwalk parade, that would be an easy way to do it. And festivals like this, local events, local challenges, especially with the Golemwalk parade, these artistic and creative challenges, that's the kind of thing I can see a lot of players really sinking their teeth into. Like, you don't have to have a single combat for the entire session, and I know a ton of players that would have the time of their life coming up with a design for a construct that they want to use in this parade, and then going through all of the player character shenanigans and antics to get the parts to build the thing so that they can then try to drive it through town and not break anything so that they can actually get their creation judged. This is one of those things where you could use like the victory point system from the Game Master Core and really just tell some absolutely hilarious and engaging stories that could help propel player characters to larger and more important events inside your campaign. So, I think that when you look at local events like the Golemwalk Parade, one very easy thing you can do as a storyteller is ask, how can I incorporate some skill challenges, some victory point challenges into these events? And you can create some absolutely fantastic non-combat encounters that I think can be very, very memorable at your gaming table. The last thing I want to talk about from these two holidays, going back to the Night of Tears, is what I think is best described as somber holidays. Because, well, most of the time, when we think about holidays, when we think about celebrations, we think of joyful events. You know, we think of Christmas, we think of Valentine's Day, we think of events where, you know, we often use holiday and celebration as synonyms for one another, and quite often that is true, but in many cultures and in many places, holidays can also be very somber events. They can be heavier events emotionally that are still very, very important to that community. Now, I'm not part of a pure military family. I know there's families out there where military service is a major part of the family's identity. I've only had a few members of my family who have served in the military, but I can tell you from my interactions with those who have served in the military that certain events like Memorial Day are often very somber events for them, and yet they also weigh those holidays very, very heavily. Those are very important days. They may not necessarily be happy-go-lucky days. People might not be celebrating in the typical sense, and yet it is a major part of their identity. And honestly, for storytellers and players alike, I think having an attachment to more somber portions of the setting and story can actually make for some pretty good drivers and for some pretty strong narrative beats. You know, imagine a player character who is a paladin of Iomedae who goes on a pilgrimage to visit the battle site for the Battle of Red Hail and participate in the vigil on the Night of Tears. They are very, very moved by the honorable sacrifice of the paladins from that battle, and it's part of their character's narrative that they want to remember that event because it helps them understand what it means for them to be a paladin themselves. So, Oftentimes when we discuss holidays, it's easy to get into the celebratory mindset, and there are certainly a lot of great celebratory holidays out there. But as a storyteller and as a player, don't necessarily skip over the idea of the somber events as well, because those also are pretty fertile narrative ground. But that's really all that I have for you today. As I said, Paizo doesn't have a lot of published material for holidays in the month of Pharast. I will say there's a little bit more for next month, including the first holiday I ever really incorporated into one of my Pathfinder games. We'll get into that. But like I said, there's not a lot going on in the month of Pharast, so there's not much else to talk about here. But let me know how you've made use of local holidays and festivals in your gaming table, how you've used them as a storyteller, how you've incorporated them into your story as a player character. Let me know how those holidays have influenced your table and what suggestions you might have for others who want to do the same. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.